everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm here with Matt Butler, who is going to be sharing a bit of his really incredible and inspiring healthful recovery story. So Matt, I'm so excited to be talking with you today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh no, thanks for inviting me.
Why don't you tell people where you are?
So I would say I am fully recovered now, which I'm absolutely delighted about. I um I had long COVID, and I'm really thankful to this channel. I want to say first of all, because I would like to think, like a lot of people, this there are times of hopelessness with these sorts of illnesses, and I think that this was a great kind of source of hope for me and played a big part in me kind of getting out. And I think although I did have long COVID, in the end, actually, I think it was the CFS ME community that helped me the most, and where so many of my symptoms were similar to that. I related much more to that as an illness than long COVID, and actually kind of reading about recovery stories from CFS ME, a lot of the stuff I saw on your channel actually ended up being the kind of inspiration and that information to kind of get me better. That's just a kind of bit of a summary where I'm at. I really struggled really and had to stop work and lots of other things. Been a very, very kind of up and down journey, but I'm really pleased to say that I'm kind of healthy again, which is fantastic.
It's incredible. You mentioned a couple of things, many of reasons that I really wanted to talk to you and get you on the channel. But one is that I know that you were incredibly unwell and basically bedbound for a while, and things were looking quite hopeless. But then, with trial and error, and you found a combination of things that worked for you. And when you really were dedicated to it for a few months, you started seeing your progress quite quickly. But then in the end, it seemed like you faced something like a lot of us face, where those last bits of recovery get a bit confusing and a bit scary, and you're not sure what you can start doing again and what's safe. And then just also that overlap with long COVID and ME/CFS, because we were talking about before we got started. I'm like, I feel like a lot of the viewers don't resonate as much with the long COVID, even though there's so much overlap. And even like myself, my ME/CFS started with a bad virus. I don't know what virus. For many people it did. And you were saying that you did not relate as much to the long COVID stories, but ME/CFS really seemed to fit for you.
100%, yeah. And I know a few people actually that are quite close to me that have had ME or CFS, and it was a few people from glandular fever actually. That was a kind of trigger for that illness. And my own experiences, I'm like, wow, this is a global pandemic, and there are people now that are 2 years in with long COVID. And part of me does wonder when there will be more questioning of what actually is long COVID, particularly when you rule out lung damage or any permanent medical damage. People that are suffering more from kind of fatigue-based symptoms, like when will they start assessing what that is? Because I don't know, I just get this sense, and having spent time in forums with people like with long COVID, there's a sense of, I think they're waiting for like a magic pill or some sort of treatment, and my kind of concern is that what if that doesn't come, and then it comes back to this kind of amazing thing that you do in terms of trying to work out of the people who recovered, what have they done? I think there's stuff out there to be learnt from, and I kind of wish that the long COVID community was directed to places like your channel, because I think there's a lot to learn from the ME/CFS community, because in my opinion it is a very similar illness, if not the same. I should caveat and say that's my personal view. I'm not a medical professional. From my own experiences, they seem to be very, very similar.
All right, so why don't you take us back to how this all started? And you're over in London, I meant to mention at the start, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in sunny London today, surprisingly. But yeah, so we're far across from one another, but connected by the wonderful internet.
So what was life like before this all started for you? What did that look like?
It's such a good question, in the sense that I think, if you don't mind me answering it in this way, if you asked me at the time before I was unwell, I think I would have said to you, do you know what, my life is fantastic, it's fun, it's varied. I think the week before I got COVID, I cycled the Coast Cycle route, which in the UK, it's just from the west to the east coast, a 140-mile cycle. I was super active. I had lots of hobbies, like particularly music. My parents are musicians, so I was engaged in kind of piano, orchestras. I had a job that I was really passionate about and gave a lot of myself to keeping lots of plates spinning. And I think, like I say, if you asked me then, I would have said fun, varied, meaningful life. I think that what I would say now about my life before I got unwell, maybe with a bit of reflection, I think all of those things remain true. But I do also think that I did give a lot of myself to a lot of things, sort of did spread myself too thinly, I think, gave a lot to other people. And I think with the jobs that I've done, I think I got a bit of a weird enjoyment out of riding lots of waves of stress, quite high pressured work environments, and put a lot of pressure on myself to succeed, I think, in a lot of things. I think the reason I'm adding that is just because I think it is relevant to the journey I've come on and the changes I've had to make, really, with me personally, to kind of, I think, get better. I think the identity thing is quite significant. But I don't know if that what you think to that, but it's great life, but there was all a busy and fruitful life also has its challenges as well, and I think it's worth acknowledging those, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's important. And it's something that virtually every person I've interviewed, for the most part, has shared. I think
Right, okay.
a question a lot of us have is, so I got whatever virus I had, you got the virus you had, other people
Yeah,
got these same viruses and they recovered. So what happened with us? And I'm sure it's not a simple answer.
yeah.
There's probably a few things that
Hmm.
come into play, but there seem to be, at least from an anecdotal perspective, some personality characteristics that overlap
Yeah,
and just a sense of just running yourself a bit ragged, a few too many things going on and
yeah,
putting stress on
yeah,
your body and your mind.
yeah.
And people who drive themselves really hard, that is another common theme. Like really kind of those overachiever, lots of pressure on
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, and I there was this book, I think it's called The Mind Body Practice or something. I need to check the title, but he had a whole chapter, the author, on personality types of people that can get these kind of chronic illnesses, and I didn't realize that that was a thing. And watching videos on your channel, it's so eye-opening that there seem to be so many similarities between kind of personality attributes. I know we're all individual and all very different, but you hear those things and you're like, this seems significant, but you can't work out why it is, but there is something in it, I think, from my own experience, because I think I also did have to change a bit of my identity really to get better, which was also unnerving. I mean, as you I'm sure could imagine, it's a hard thing to change something that's quite deep rooted, isn't it?
Even all these years later, with everything I've learned, I'm still working on some things that I know are problematic personality traits of mine.
Right.
It's a tough thing to turn around. And then you'll
It
make
is.
progress, and then I'll find I'll have a bit of a relapse. I'm like, I thought I was past this. I thought I knew better.
Mm.
But yeah, it's a bit of a
Yeah, it's
journey.
like your that kind of default mode, your natural kind of state of being. That however much you do manage to change some ways, there are just ways you are in certain scenarios, and that is challenging. I think that's a hard part of this thing. And then when you can no longer do lots of things, but you're someone that prides yourself on being able to do lots of things, that's very conflicting. I think, but yeah, it's very tough.
So what happened for you? Did you get very sick all of a sudden, or what did that look like?
The honest answer is no, and I don't know if anyone watching they've had similar experiences. Obviously, I had COVID. I had one jab at the time, and I had very mild symptoms. I actually continued working. The strange thing about it was, as soon as I came out of isolation, I then I think a few weeks passed, possibly even a month, where things were seemingly fine. I did just jump back into life. I sort of got back on my bike. I went on a camping holiday, did lots of like walking. And then I had this day, and I still think about it regularly. I had this day where lots of stressful things happened emotionally. I mean, I think I did a really intense workout. I then had a day where I had lots of stresses. I had this emotionally stressful day, and about an hour later, I remember sitting at my work desk, and I suddenly had this sensation where I was like, I'm struggling to remain sitting up. I just kind of, it was so overwhelming that I think I just remember thinking something's not right here. And I went to my bedroom, just closed my work laptop, rang up my mum. I mean, a lot of us have someone we ring in times of despair and need. And I said, Mum, something's not right here. I felt very unsafe, very like panicky. At this point, I wasn't thinking this could be long COVID. I was like, something's wrong with my body, and I was struggling to talk to her on the phone in terms of energy. And I just thought, look, there's no point in worrying about this. The best thing is to just maybe accept that it's a bad day. I'm ill. Things will probably be fine tomorrow. And ultimately, things didn't get better. And I just then had this period of about 3 months where I would say things got worse and really went through a kind of boom and bust. Experienced extreme fatigue, muscle and joint aches. I just couldn't tolerate any activity. Like a 5-10 minute walk, I'd be nearly fainting. I find it very difficult. My heart rate, because I used to have a Garmin watch because of exercise, my heart rate was all over the place. I mean, I used to sort of do 4-hour cycles and my heart rate wouldn't get up to like 120. My heart rate was 140, 150 beats per minute, like standing up. I was just so confused by what was going on. I had insomnia, depression, and I think those extreme booms and busts as well was so hard because you would be like, I want to go on a walk, but then I'll be out of it for a week, and it was just so debilitating. And that's when I started to put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, this could be long COVID, and I did get referred to a long COVID clinic in the end. But to be honest, from my research, I was like, this really feels like, from what I'm reading, chronic fatigue syndrome or an ME type illness, really, based on my experiences. I've now learned terms like post-exertional malaise, POTS. I've learned about these things that I can really relate to in terms of the symptoms that I had. So yeah, my view was really like I had some sort of post-viral fatigue type illness. I didn't actually get that as a diagnosis. The only thing that I did get officially was kind of long COVID through the referrals that I had. But that's kind of the journey I went on through, from having, the infection to having a little kind of gap, and then having this big crash, and then sort of having months of sort of things being really kind of up and down, but mostly downward, really, is it in summary.
And just before we dive into the things that you tried and one ended up working for you, because I'm really excited for that, to hear about that, as I'm sure other people are. I think it's important just to get a clear picture of, when things got to their worst for you, your worst day or your worst week. What did that look like?
I mean, the worst period I can recall, because it was only last year, was when I had to move in with my parents temporarily, because I just couldn't do the basics by myself. I couldn't cook. The most basic tasks were a struggle, and I felt that I needed extra support. I do live with my girlfriend, but she works. There was only so much I can expect from her to help with. My parents sort of semi-retired, and my mum's a teacher, and coincidentally at this time that I was at my work, she was on a half-term break, so she was like, come over, and I ended up staying there for a little while actually. And yeah, I just remember there were days I was just in bed on and off most of the day. I'd be cooked for, cleaned for. I mean, I've got to say I'm very thankful and grateful that I could be looked after in that way. And I think that at the time the weather was really good, and the only kind of upside was that I could literally take a chair outside and just at least sit on the patio and listen to the birds. I was really kind of debilitated in the sense that I couldn't feel that I could walk or do any form of kind of real kind of movement or exercise. And I think mentally I found it really challenging because I felt so out of control of my body and lost all confidence in my own body and what it could do. And I'm not someone, I've experienced anxiety before, but depression not so much for me personally. But I got really low because I felt like a huge loss. I stopped work. I just had to clear my calendar, all my commitments. I had my mum looking after me, and I'm 31. I was like, this feels like a real regression. So that was it at its worst, and I think that, I look back on it and I go, I was crying every day. I just couldn't. I was just so sad at the situation. But I think that I have got to acknowledge and be thankful for the fact that I did have that support. I've got a good set of family and friends, and people did ring me up, and thankfully I wasn't too hindered by the brain fog. Like I couldn't hold a conversation like I could before, but I could manage them, and I could do that for like an hour. So my friends could still ring me up. At least I could talk to them and have a moment of distraction and not thinking about being ill and in the situation I was in. But yeah, that was the kind of worst point where I just felt like it was really debilitating. Like I couldn't do much at all, and I couldn't really see a way out, because you would wake up each day and it would be the same or worse. You were like, I never had that sense that I was going to wake up and be better. It's such an odd thing to describe. I just knew it, and it was really, I don't know why. Maybe because it had just gone on for a while. I was like, there's no change here, and that was quite tough actually.
I think that's such a good point too, and I'm glad you brought it up about even with support. I mean, this is such a devastating and crushing thing to go through. I mean, anyone would struggle under the weight of all of that. It's massive. I don't even have the words for it. The grief involved, the hopelessness, the fear, the overwhelm. So even with people taking care of you, so I can only imagine for people who don't have that kind of support. I just think for people watching, I think we all struggle, and sometimes we're hard on ourselves and we think I should be doing better, but we all, it's just anyone would under the weight of all of this.
Yeah, and it's hard to accept sometimes that help and really accept it fully, because I think there's a sense of pride in, you want to be able to do things yourself, but to accept that help fully was a bit of a process as well. to accept that maybe it's a British thing, but you get those unspoken rules. If someone cooks, the other person washes up. I don't know if you get it where you are, but it just little things like that, and they sound so minuscule, but when you're not able to do anything and then you're aware that others are doing so much for you, like way beyond the norm, there's a guilt. I think that guilt is such a hard emotion that's not spoken about a lot, but it's really powerful. And feeling guilty when you're also ill because you can't do what you want to do and help just makes the whole thing a lot more challenging, is what I came to realize from my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So from conventional medicine, they were telling you long COVID, were they giving you anything in terms of, treatment recommendations?
No, and I feel like I've got to give some credit to the National Health Service in the UK, because they did set up these long COVID clinics, and I think that in itself is a great thing. They're trying to offer something. My experiences of the clinic was that it was mostly just tests. They did various scans on my lungs and things, and again, there was no damage. Which is a good thing, right? You're like, oh, great. But in a way, when they do test and they say there's nothing obviously wrong, but you are experiencing symptoms, there's a bit of a kind of conflict there. You're like, well, what is going on? But there wasn't really any treatments. At this time, I started to work with Pamela Rose, a fatigue coach who you've featured on your channel. I believe you're friends with. I'd go as far as to say. I'd also started some brain retraining programs and working with a psychologist. So I already kind of felt that I was starting to take recovery into my own hands, and that kind of gave me a new sense of hope and direction. And so in the end, walking away from that long COVID clinic without treatment options didn't feel so bad, because at least I had a bit of a plan. At least I was working towards, so I didn't feel too hopeless. I think for people that go to those clinics and they've waited for that clinic, because in the UK you have to have had 12 weeks as a period of time before you can get referred to a long COVID clinic. You need to give it that amount of time before they would regard you as having long COVID. I think for the people that may wait that amount of time, maybe with all this built up kind of anticipation for some sort of treatment and help, I can imagine that could feel quite deflating to kind of walk away from that maybe without an answer or a treatment. I think that would be really challenging. I mean, I'm probably projecting my own emotions here, but yeah, I think it's a tough one because there isn't those treatments really.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm so grateful now that there are more options for people, way more options for people to recover. I mean, we don't know that one size fits all plan yet, unfortunately, if there ever will be one. One of the things I've started to appreciate is that it could probably be a bit overwhelming to even just sift through what's out there. So when you sort of decided to take this more into your own hands, what did that look like, and how did you know where to start?
Oh, yeah, it's overwhelming, isn't it? I mean, credit to you and your channel. I mean, I think Google and the internet, to begin with, is a great thing and a bad thing. I think my relationship with the internet at the beginning of this illness probably was unhealthy. When I was feeling at my worst and wasn't feeling hopeful about recovering at all, there are places online that can reinforce your beliefs and feelings. I mean, if you're not feeling great about things, you will be able to find a forum where there are people that are unfortunately really unwell and obviously really distressed by that. And you can spend so much time in those forums that, you can reinforce your belief you won't get better. I think what really helped was I saw a few articles related to Pamela Rose, the fatigue coach, people she had helped. And that was a bit of a nugget for me. I was like, I just need one recovery story. There isn't many online, particularly with long COVID. And that was the starting point. And I kind of felt so hopeless by it. I was like, I need to have some hope. So I reached out to her and I did one of her courses. And then that kind of opened up a new discovery in world. I discovered your channel. I discovered the Hill with Liz. Is it Liz? Hill with Liz and various other people online. That actually there are a lot of recovery stories out there. And then that suddenly made me feel more hopeful, because I was like, oh, there are people that recover, and I just need a few that have recovered to give me that hope. I think you did a video, and you're gonna have to tell me what video it was, because you'll probably know the answer. But I think you did a video along the lines of common themes. Was it common themes of recovery, or common things people have done that have helped them recover? And admittedly, I did see this kind of later on, but I was actually watching your videos and others and trying to make connections myself, and common themes do come up. And I think that I'm the sort of individual, I mean, with my job as well, I really like to know what a problem is to be able to come up with ideas. And I think the thing I found really hard with this illness, there's no one putting out there a possible reason for why this illness occurs or happens. And therefore, when I tried things, I was like, I don't even know if this is going to work, because I don't know what I'm trying to solve. I don't know what problem I'm trying to solve. And I think that what I quite liked with what I was reading about on your channel and other channels is that there was a common theme around nervous system dysregulation, that you could be stuck in this kind of fight and flight mode constantly. I was also, you hear things around brain retraining programs, and there perhaps being a problem with the limbic system. And again, your brain thinking you've kind of got stuck, and thinks that you're in it's kind of gone in shutdown mode, and you're in a lot of danger, and sending all sorts of signals to your body, overreacting to stimuli, other things. And there were certain elements that I was reading, and I was like, that actually kind of resonates with me. I could buy into that. And I thought, for me, I wanted to take some sort of hypothesis, if you like, and then work with that. And then I think for me, it then became a kind of, well, why don't I try a program of things that could calm the nervous system? Why don't I try a program of things that work on the brain side? And that's kind of when things started to improve, maybe because I felt like I had a plan, maybe because I felt like I was onto something. Whether or not those things are scientifically, medically true, I think it was significant more because I felt like I maybe had a nugget of insight into what could be causing this. And I felt that a lot of the things that people have tried on your channel and others have tried, I thought actually maybe they are fairly harmless. I thought doing breathing exercises or meditation, I would like to think I've got nothing to lose. I can give it a go. It's not harmful. And I think that that was how I got to where I got to, finding the right channels, finding those common themes, making some decisions on what I will try, and then a combination of all of those things, which I could cover off in more detail. But that was basically how I got to where I got to with deciding what to do.
So what sorts of things did you try, or what things were helpful for you?
I think the things that were really helpful were, one, this was kind of from Pamela Rose, really, learned the importance of pacing. I think that was the first step. I think I read, again, like I say, I related more to CFS and ME than kind of long COVID in terms of symptoms. And I heard the word pacing, but I didn't know how to do it. And I think that the Pamela course was really good at giving you a daily and a weekly schedule, the importance of actually kind of sizing up activity tasks and scheduling in rests, even if you don't feel like you need one, just being really consistent in a practice, if you like, which at first I thought, God, this is bizarre. I'm scheduling in a rest, and I'm scheduling in emptying the dishwasher, and then I'm scheduling in a breathing exercise. But again, it was just having a plan, and it also to schedule in like more joyful activities as well was really game changing, when I think psychologically I just felt very out of control. I'd lost all confidence in my body. To have some sort of control and a plan was really motivating. So that's kind of one thing that really helps. I think when I then tried stuff that was calming the nervous system, like yoga, meditation, breathing exercises, I mean, I had never done any of this stuff before. I was like, surely sitting here and doing some breathing in and out isn't going to do anything. And then I ended up becoming one of those guys that was like, breathing's going to solve all your problems. I became such a kind of advocate of it. And I just remember the first time I did a meditation, and I was like, that was great, and I felt better. And I think after doing these things for like a week, I was like, I've obviously still got symptoms, but the edge has just gone off slightly. And for me, that was enough to be like, well, this is doing something. And then what I ended up doing was integrating yoga, meditation, and breathing into Pamela's schedule. So my weekly schedule. So not just my activity and my rest, but I would do these kind of like deep relaxation exercises. And I did them for like 2 hours a day. And I mean, I can be someone that does things quite, not obsessively, but to the nth degree. And I took this schedule so seriously that I think I honestly did about 2 hours of breathing, yoga, meditation, like not one of each of them, but just I would rotate them so I had that variety. But I'd do that for that amount of hour per day, and I did that for about 2 months constantly. And I think then I was able to start doing a bit of lightweight training, again from your channel, the recommendation, because I knew I couldn't manage cardio. My heart rate was all over the place, which was a shame. But then again, being able to do a bit of weight training, a bit of yoga, just being able to move my body again, just filled me with confidence and joy, because I was like, just by lying around so much because I can't do anything, I was feeling so kind of stiff and restless, and to be able to do that again kind of filled me with confidence. And then I think I then got to a place where at least I could cope day to day. Symptoms were slightly better. I could cook the odd meal. I could watch TV in the evening and not be completely whacked. I'd stop the boom and bust cycle, and that was fantastic. And then I think the kind of final things that really helped for me was I found a psychologist who specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy. And again, I went into that with a real open mind, and I wanted to try this before I did a brain retraining program, because I'd read that CBT can help some people, and I'm quite interested in psychology. I would say I'm fairly psychologically self-aware, and I was like, I'm willing to give this a go. And again, he just made me really aware of, those like automatic thoughts that you don't even think about are going on. You probably have thousands of them a day. They're just going around your head. You don't really think about them too much. I came to understand more about those, particularly in the relationship to being ill, and the kind of catastrophizing, in the sense that I then became fearful of certain activities because when I did them, I crashed. So they became fears. And then when I engaged in those activities, I realized I had all these thoughts going around my head that were kind of catastrophizing and quickly fearing a crash, really. And I understood more about the relationship between those thoughts, how that then made me feel incredibly kind of anxious and worried, and then what that influenced my behavior. Because I realized, I think the thing I kept going back and forward with this illness was complete avoidance and then doing things. And I think the middle ground is what was the good thing. I think when I just avoided doing anything and completely rested, yes, I didn't feel so fatigued, but then I'm not finding a way out of it because I'm never doing the things that I'm really scared of. And I think that whole experience, CBT, was very insightful, because he had this thing called behavioral experiments. So you write down before you list all the things that you're now fearful of because of this illness, like going for a walk, a run, going back to work. And what he then did was work out what's the smallest way in which you could engage with each of these activities. So if it was walking and that was your fear, start by doing walk to the end of the road, which is like a few steps. If it was I'm scared of going on my bike again because I think I'll crash, it's sit on the bike and just go for 2 meters. And what was interesting is seeing the difference between what I anticipated would happen and then seeing what actually did happen, and challenging my thoughts more and realizing that my thoughts and feelings aren't always true. I think that was the most unnerving thing about the whole experience, is that what I was convinced would happen didn't always happen, at least to the degree in which I thought. It wasn't always a crash. It could have been a dip or a flare, and it was me challenging myself in that way that was really eye-opening. And I think he helped me be a bit more assertive and have better boundaries with my environment, with people. And again, I think with the challenges of this illness, I think that's really hard when you're quite vulnerable, and to kind of protect what's coming in and out, I think was a big thing. And finally, I did do 2 brain training things, like the DNRS, and I did a intro session for the lightning process. And again, similar to the CBT, I think the techniques that I learned there, like visualizations, talking to the brain myself, exposure therapy, all those sorts of things, again, they kind of just give you like techniques, particularly for in the moment stuff, like when you're actually engaging in fearful activity, like you've got techniques to use that kind of just really help you. Got that kind of negative spiral, but it was so challenging. I mean, for me, I sometimes feel when I've watched people on your channel about brain retraining stuff, I think you can sit on the other side and go, wow, it seems like they did it, and then the next day they were like recovered. I know that's not what they're saying, but you can get that. Do you see what I'm saying when I say that? It's kind of like, it seems this kind of magic cure sort of thing. And I did those things, and I worked with a psychologist, but I found it it kind of got me there. It got me to recovery, but it was tough. Because it was kind of like you're going against what your brain's telling you not to do. It's like everything in my body and brain was saying, this is dangerous. Don't do this. And I was having to kind of carefully expose myself to those things with certain techniques in a very, very gradual, small way. But every time I did that, that was requiring a lot of courage, really, I suppose. It never got any easier for me. Even now I'm better, I still have a sort of slight re-injury anxiety where I'm like, could this trigger something? I didn't have this for as long as other people on your channel, and for me it still has had that kind of traumatic effect, really, which I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised to hear, perhaps.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Even to this day, I'm mostly good, but even sometimes, because I still push myself really hard, and if I'm getting a bit worn out, there's still a little voice in my head that is like, is this just normal tired, or is this a sign of something coming back?
Yeah.
It's a bit of, not a bit of, it's trauma we've been through, and it's understandable. It's natural to be scared once in a while, to ever have to go back there. So this is all really helpful, because you've tried a lot of programs that people have asked me about that I haven't tried myself. So in addition to working with the fatigue coach and all of that, and then the psychologist with the CBT, and then you said you did the DNRS, which is dynamic neural retraining. What I can't. Do you remember?
Yeah, do you know what? I should really know what that stands for, shouldn't I?
I'll link it in. I'll put it in the video description. I will figure it out by the time this goes out. It's so often just called DNRS. I don't even think about the full name of it. But it's essentially a brain training program for people who aren't aware, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And people that use it, or that it's advertised for, are things like chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, fibromyalgia, multiple chemical sensitivities, and they're recently kind of targeting people with long COVID, really. And they now have quite a few testimonials of recovery stories from people with long COVID. So it was one of those courses where, again, I've got to acknowledge the fact that I did have the disposable income to pay for something like that. All of these things I did require personal savings, and that's a privileged position to be in. Without that money, I wouldn't have been able to do these things. But the course itself, it's funny, the kind of course material, you could say, is a bit retro. It's I think it's based on kind of DVD content, really old school. But I sort of said to myself, I'm going to give it a go and be open-minded with it. And a lot of what it does is like visualizations, which again, I mean, like I said, with the mindfulness, the breathing stuff, that was the first time I sort of done things like that. And it gets you to do visualizations around things that you can no longer do or that you find hard to do. And you do various techniques where you're first talking to your brain and how it's kind of stuck in this overprotective mode. And then you visualize these activities that you can no longer do, but you doing them healthily. And it's very much about activating emotions behind all of that as well. I think there's crossover with like athletes, and how athletes, before they engage with a Olympic long jump or whatever, apparently they visualize a successful long jump before they do it. And apparently psychologically the brain is kind of getting the same outtake from just the visualization, and it can really improve. I might be getting the science wrong, but it just increases the chances of you doing it successfully. And I think that from doing those daily, perhaps, and again, I don't know what the science is behind it, perhaps my brain was then thinking that I was doing these things and it was becoming more normal and less scary. I don't know, but it did work. I look back on it now and I'm like, I can't believe I used to stand on bits of paper around the floor and do these visualizations. I think if a friend, family, or girlfriend came in to the room, me doing these things, standing on bits of paper, they'll be like, "What is he doing?" But it did help, you know, and I've got to acknowledge that it really did. I no longer do those things, but I think that if I felt I was really struggling again, or I felt things felt a bit, stress was becoming significant and that was having an impact on me physically, I think that I would go back to things like meditation and those kind of visualization and relaxation techniques, because I know that they can really help.
I'm curious as well if with DNRS and the lightning process, did you find one more helpful with your recovery? I know it'll vary for different people. I'm just curious for you personally, or did they both give you tools that you incorporated?
It was interesting because there were quite a few of these programs, and I think Hill with Liz did an article on perhaps comparing them, or at least kind of listing them. And I kind of looked at all of them and looked at their websites. I think what's worth flagging is that the lightning process, I just did the podcast, or it's kind of like it's like an intro course. It's kind of like a 4-hour audio file. So I didn't do the full program, whereas the NRS one, I did do the full program. They were quite different, and the lightning process one I did first, and I think that's got more of an emphasis on language. I think it might be called neuro-linguistic programming or something. And I think the one thing that I found so spooky about that, in terms of potentially how effective it was they talk about using language in the moment. So sort of like, again, so say walking. At the time that I signed up to the lightning process, I couldn't walk for more than 5-10 minutes. And I remember that when I was walking, obviously in my head, I was like really kind of struggling, like physically, but in my mind, I was like, oh God, am I going to crash? You know, like expecting kickback. What they kind of do is get you to think about language that, like, for example, just repeat, I am safe, I am safe. And it sounds so small. What I've come to realize, I think when I said to you at the beginning of this, when I first had that day where I crashed, I just felt really unsafe. It's such a weird thing to say. And I think that with my life at the time, there was nothing to suggest that I wasn't safe. Like, I was in a healthy relationship, I had family and friends, I had savings, I had a good job, but I just had this, it's really hard to describe, but I just felt very unsafe. And I think that what was interesting about the lightning process was it was saying, well, when you're engaging in those activities, just in your head and almost out loud, just keep repeating, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe, you know, kind of self-talking to your brain and your body to kind of reassure it that I'm not in danger here. We don't need to be fearful in this kind of moment. And I think the first time I tried that, I then managed to walk for 15 minutes or something. And I kind of got home and I was like, did that really just happen? Something as simple as language? Surely not. Surely that's too simple. But I think it it proved to me that there are probably things that are simple, that are effective. They're maybe just not understood or well known. And there are these techniques out there. And I ended up just becoming more open-minded to these sorts of things. I think I ended up coaching myself quite a lot, talking to myself quite a lot. I kind of probably looked like a mad person. I think if anyone passed me at the street at certain times where I was sort of semi-talking out loud, they're like, "What's this guy sort of saying? He's saying he's safe whilst he's walking around." But it did really help, and I found that those in the moment techniques, I think like I was saying, I found the hardest bit was actually going beyond 10-minute walks and trying to get back to kind of being able to be more active. I found that bit really hard because I found that every time that I increased the amount of activity I was doing, almost every time halfway into a walk, I had that kind of sensation of everything just kind of leaving me. And I was like, no, I just felt that there was that crash coming. And I tried to combine all these different techniques, like either I'd just sit down and do my breathing exercises, or I'd have to go through all these kind of like DNRS rounds. And I remember there was one time where I just had to sit down for 15 minutes to just try and kind of stop my brain doing that. And it required so much energy and effort. And I always felt that sometimes I was on the brink of not managing to kind of control it. And that's why I kind of say I felt that the process, it worked, but it was hard, I think. For me, it was, it required a lot of conscious effort, and it did work. But I think even when I was like 80-90% better, I had to do that stuff every time for me personally. Maybe because I was really wanting to get better quite quickly. I was maybe kind of trying to kind of really incrementally increase things maybe on the upper end. But to be honest, even the psychologist I work with, he really did land home the importance of incremental increases, very, very small increases, and that plateaus are fine and even dips are fine. But I think it's quite an arduous, got to be very patient with it, and in the end it did lead to be fine. But I think, it probably is a bit of a buzzword, but I kind of really came to kind of, for me personally, really believe the whole kind of mind-body connection. I think that from my own experiences, I found that my thoughts, my feelings, my beliefs, my attitudes could positively or negatively affect my symptoms. And I think that it was a hard one to accept, if I'm perfectly honest with you, because I think that I knew the virus was the thing that started the illness, but it was hard to accept that my brain or potentially kind of mind or thoughts, feelings could hinder my progress, or it could help it. Do you see what I mean? It was kind of, I was having those nights in by myself going, am I to blame here? And it, like, am I keeping me in this? And it's uncomfortable. And I think that's why my heart goes out to anyone with this illness. And I found it so tough because wouldn't it be great if there was a magic pill and to all these kind of treatments that people try, and different things work for different people, but they're not easy a lot of the time, and it's very personal stuff, and I think that's what made it quite challenging, really, and it kind of brings up uncomfortable questions. But I think that you can only be open-minded or try and be as best you can to these sorts of things in the hope that it works for you, but what may work for me may not work for someone else, and I think that change requires change, and it can be quite hard change, I think. To break away from your normal habits and mindset and thoughts and stuff is blooming hard work, at least in
Yeah,
my own experiences.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you've explained all that. And virtually every person I'd say I've interviewed who used some sort of brain training program as a part of their recovery has said very similar things. I mean,
Right.
I'm noticing a lot of themes. This is just my own observations. But, one is that most people are saying that it's an aspect of their recovery. It wasn't the whole
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah.
Another one is that it was a lot of work. Seems to be a misconception with a lot of people that it's you learn some tools over the weekend and then Monday you sign up for a marathon and you're good as new.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a ton of work. Like you have to
Yeah.
actively work on it. And nobody is telling you, or people aren't jumping straight into really strenuous activity. It's still an incremental buildup while you slowly build that trust and lose that fear. One thing from all the interviews that I've done, the biggest thing that I've learned from the reading and the people that I've talked to, or the biggest thing I've come to appreciate, is how powerful our brains are. Like I
Oh, yeah.
really underestimated this with my own recovery, and I wish I had understood that, and how much ability they have. Our brain, which includes our thoughts, our emotions, impacts how our body heals and the symptoms that manifest. And I think you were touching on this a bit. It can feel a bit insulting almost that our thoughts or our feelings could be impacting this very real illness that we have. It's like it takes away from it somehow, because it's intense suffering and really severe symptoms. So it's a tough thing
100.
to wrap your brain around, so
I
to
know,
speak.
and also those symptoms are very real. I mean, they're not
Yeah.
they are real. And why wouldn't you think that those symptoms are only physical? Because you're experiencing them as physical, aren't you? And I think with the treatment of long COVID, what I noticed is a lot of people are really focusing on all the individual symptoms, and they're trying to kind of like whack-a-mole, right, let's focus on my achy legs. I'm going to take something for that, and I'm going to take something for the headaches, and I'm going to take something for the gut, and they're trying to heal them all individually. And what I found kind of fascinating was that when I started focusing a bit more on the brain stuff, and a bit more on like the kind of meditation, the kind of calming body and the mind with all these techniques, the symptoms collectively eased. And it did take time, but I stopped taking all the vitamins and I stopped taking all the things I was doing to try and do everything individually. And it kind of, they kind of solved themselves. They eased collectively over time. I think that's a kind of hard thing, again, that was to accept that I was shifting the focus of what I was working on, becoming less focused on the symptoms, I suppose, and more focused on, like you were saying, like the brain stuff, and accepting that could play a role, which, was a big shift. And I think the identity point for me was huge. Like the changing my identity was a massive one for me. I don't know if that's another theme that comes up with people you speak to, or your own experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we could do a whole video just about that. I think it's a pretty relevant topic and pretty complex, just how our identity, how it impacted, perhaps how it played a role in us getting sick, not that it's our fault, but of that perfect storm of things. And then how that identity and the personality plays into our recovery and how we approach it and how that helps us or holds us back. I think it's a whole thing. I could keep you here all day. I have probably 50 more questions that I want to ask you, but I'm like, okay, I know these videos can't go on forever. And I'm sure people watching have questions as well. So perhaps they can put them in the video comments and we can continue the conversation there. But I just always like to wrap up just knowing, because we know that there are people watching that are still in it, that are still struggling. So, what message would you have for them or for yourself if you could go back in time?
Sending everyone a big hug, because it is awful. I think it is the most misunderstood illness, and I felt quite isolated with it. Heart goes out to everyone. It's very, very tricky. I think, yes, recovery can be different for everyone. What I've taken away from this is that, in my own experiences, the mind and body are connected. So I think there should be some open-mindedness, if there isn't already, to kind of at least exploring that or reading about it. I think that I learned that another takeaway from me was just how important it is to reduce stress in this time. I was hypersensitive to any stress. I mean, I just couldn't handle even close to what I could do. And I think as best to reduce that is only helpful. And I think that, like, for people facing something similar, I think if you don't deep down, and this was a big struggle for me, I think if you deep down don't believe recovery is possible, I think the best thing is to try and find belief, that it is possible in whatever way that lies, whether it's reading all the videos on your channel. They're watching this, so they probably have done. But I read various books around healing from chronic illnesses, and I think you need that belief, because for half the period in which I was ill, I deep down didn't believe it. People said I would, but I didn't believe it. It was only when I started believing that it was possible that progress could start. And I think that don't believe the prognosis of these illnesses. I personally believe the statistics around these, it's because it's not understood. I think there's a lot to understand about these illnesses. I really think the prognoses can make you feel quite hopeless, particularly, the NHS website in the UK. I think it says less than 5 people recover. I mean, anyone that reads that, that's not going to make you feel good. So I think that's one thing. I think related to the above, have someone in your life, or try and find someone that can keep that hope for you when you lose it, because there were times that even when I was believing I would recover, there were days where I lost that belief. And to go to someone that will tell you, look, listen, you did believe, I believe, carry on believing, I think is important. And I think keep an open mind with different approaches to recovery and remain psychologically minded. A lot of us, I think there are very everyday examples of knowing how the mind and body are connected. You're nervous for a flight. You may have sweaty palms. You may need to go to the toilet more often. Like, there are everyday examples that prove they're connected. And I think be open to that and see what you can influence to kind of improve symptoms. And I think finally, just use the internet wisely. I think for me, it could be my age, but I found that the internet could do bad things in terms of where I got to on the internet with reading about these things actually kind of could make me feel even more hopeless. So I think use the internet wisely, spend a lot of time on YouTube channels like yours, watch videos like yours that kind of keep that hope, really, because I think you need that, don't you? It's incredibly difficult. You need to believe it. And I think the final thing I'd say is change requires change. I think I was stuck for me, that what felt like a long time. What I now reflect back on is that I actually needed to radically change my daily habits and my life, really. I needed to make huge changes to see that change. And even then, it was very incremental and small. So I think the behavioural side of it is tough, and it's kind of working out when you're gonna. I think I had to make this conscious choice at a point in time. I'm really going to go for this now. Like, I can't. I'm so low with it now. I need to really start committing everything I can to this to get better. And I think that find those people that can support you to help you do that, really.
I am so grateful to you, Matt. I am just so impressed. Everything is just so incredibly well said. And I think there's a lot of insights, and you've just been very honest with sharing your story. Thank you so much for doing this today. I know a lot of people are going to appreciate it.
And a big thank you to you. I mean, part of me wanting to do this was do the full circle thing, like to be someone that was unwell, that watched your channel, consumed all your videos, and then I'm on your channel to say I'm better. I think a lot of thanks go to you, because I think it plays a big part in my recovery, because you surfaced all these learnings from all these people, and it gave me the hope. So I mean, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you, really, because what you're doing is helping a load of people, and hopefully your material gets even more eyeballs from people in the medical field as well, because I just, with things like long COVID and the future of these illnesses, I think we need to hear more from the people that have found recovery and take that kind of seriously, and start looking at possible treatments for these illnesses, really.
Well, it's very nice to hear. I appreciate that. It means the world to me to know that this channel helped in some way. So thank you for sharing that. And it is very interesting. I do have doctors reaching out to me now telling me that they're watching my channel. And I say, that it both is, flattering and scary. But, I think we do all need to work together. And it's just nice seeing
Yeah.
people being open-minded to experience and focusing on recovery, because it is definitely possible. So, yeah, a massive thank you to you again. And of course, always thank you to people watching. Looking forward, as always, to your comments and questions. And I just want to say to all of you, I know it can feel incredibly tough. I know it can feel like things are never going to change. I know your weeks or your days or your hours can feel impossibly hard sometimes. Just keep at it. Good for you for watching videos like this. Good for you for watching to the end. That's impressive. That shows right there that you are a go-getter and you're serious about this. So I really just want to send my love out to everyone who's watching, and just, you're not alone. Other people have been through it, and so many people have got past it. And I do believe that, if you keep at it, that you can too. So yeah, that is it for today. Thank you again, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.